Hey, welcome to Creative Block. We're your host, Gene.
And V, we interview people in creative industries about their life, work, and hobbies while we do a little jam.
We ask people on Twitter if they had specific... Nope, couldn't do it. We ask people on Twitter if they had specific topics they want us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts.
And today with us, we have Tyson
Hesse?
Oh my gosh, I was like, Hesse. I'm so sorry I didn't ask the pronunciation.
No, it's fine. Everybody, I've got in Hesse.
Tell the world how you pronounce your name.
It's just Hesse.
Okay.
Okay.
Hesse. Okay. Well, welcome to the
Tried
show.
the rest, now try the Hesse.
Right. I like that. That's good. Welcome to Creative Block. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Tyson, tell us who you are and what you do.
I are cartoon.
Yeah. Nailed it.
Next question.
Yeah, next question.
Let's see. Such a broad question.
It is. I like knowing how people answer it. Everyone has a different answer.
Yeah, I have a kind of. Well, I'll start with who I am. Maybe I am. Ooh, that's existential, actually. Man.
All right, good. You are an artist. You've worked on web comics. You've worked on animation. You're kind of the king of the Sonic IP, I would say. That's my words, not yours, but I will say it.
Let's say.
Do you agree with that? How do
It's no.
Okay.
It's the Sonic stuff. Let me back up.
Yes.
Okay. I am a 37. I am a 37-year-old man. I live in Los Angeles with my wife and dog. That is who I am. What I do, I guess that's where it gets tricky sometimes. Like, I guess people ask, "What do you do?" all the time, but like,
Right.
I'm barely a cartoonist anymore. Just because the past like 5 years or so, it's been just all directing. And when I do directing. That's how you say that, right? It's like I do a lot of drawing, but it's just none of it ever gets shown, right? It's like
Right.
I have a tendency to be very hands-on, like to a degree that I think most studios aren't really prepared for sometimes. Like we just did a Sonic series of animations with Powerhouse Animation, who is a wonderful animation studio based out of Texas. But I think they, like most of their projects were expecting to be handed a prompt and then they turn in storyboards and, checkpoints and like this and that. And maybe they'll get notes or whatever, but they just kind of move forward and do their thing. But, I'll do a lot of stuff, like to the point, like I'll ask to take scenes, or I'll give them like full keyframes on a full scene, or I even, when we went over our time limit, I animated a full scene by myself to make sure that we didn't have overages on money and stuff. And like, that's a thing that I do often. And I think that's how I continue to feel like a cartoonist is by finding little ways to squeak in actual drawing work when I can. But it's like the amount of actual drawings that I get to like post online, or like full illustrations that I get to do, are very, very minimal now. And it's kind of weird, right? Like,
Do you miss it? Do you like doing that stuff, or do you kind of like this role?
No, I absolutely miss it, which is why I keep trying to do it every time. Like, I could easily just sit back and say, no, me, director, you draw, that kind of stuff. But it's like I will actively search for ways that I can really, get my hands dirty and actually do some stuff.
Yeah.
So
I think that's really interesting. Yeah, because I feel like often I remember a question that I was asked by someone that was like, "Oh, do you want to move up because you want to stop drawing?" And what you're saying, like, I relate to a lot because I love drawing, and it's true. When you move up, you draw a lot less, unless you, like you said, you get very hands-on.
I'm the opposite. I don't want to draw. I don't want to ever draw again. But I get it. I mean, I think, but you're good at it, and you have, like, watching your career over the years has been crazy because I've been following you since Boxer Hockey, and we're gonna hop around a little bit, I think.
Sure, go for it.
But yeah, like that webcomic went from, like, I'm gonna phrase this carefully, but like it went from like being just a webcomic on the internet to being a fucking amazing looking, like cinematic looking thing. And you learned so much clearly just in the span of like a few years. And then suddenly your career like went off like a rocket, it seemed like, from my perspective. I'm sure to you, you know, it's small milestones and you're just kind of seeing things happen in slow motion. But like it was amazing, and then all of a sudden you're, you know, working on all these amazing projects, and I know it sounds like it gives you pause, but like you have been such a huge part in keeping the Sonic IP like relevant to the fans and giving back to the fans, and like that, so many people I think appreciate that, and it's really cool. I think that's I know it's hard for you to describe your what you do, but to me, that from my perspective as a fan of yours, that's kind of the arc is webcomic artist to, you know, now handling this like huge IP, and it's amazing.
Can I ask really fast, kind of what your could you give us like a little bit like the keynotes of like your career in terms of like when did you start the web comic and what was your inspiration for starting it, and were you hoping to have a career only in comics, or were you always kind of interested to dip into animation?
Let's see, it's multi-tiered question.
Yeah.
How to attack this. So I'll start with the second part first. I think when I was younger, you know, I wanted to be a cartoonist, like by definition, you know, like making cartoons, right? I think because most kids that get into this stuff, that's what they want to do. They see cartoon and then they want to make cartoon, and that's kind of it, right? So I went to school for animation. I got a degree in animation, and then like when I was at school for animation, that's when I started Boxer Hockey. And I did that because this is just the way I am, where I was like, I got to school and I'm like, I'm not working enough, right? So it's like I need to give myself my own extracurricular assignments.
Sure, that's great.
So yeah, I basically, like, freshman year, I started Boxer Hockey just to give myself an outlet to do my own thing, tell my own stories, that kind of thing. And then during the course of getting my degree, Boxer Hockey was doing, like, you know, not like great, but it was doing fine. It was doing fine enough for when I was done with school to think, maybe I'll just keep trying to do this, right? This was like the very beginning of the kind of webcomic bubble forming, which I don't know. I'm so out of the game and out of like the scene and the community that I don't know how it's going for everyone out there anymore. But like at the time, it was just kind of starting to be a thing where you could consider making a living and livelihood off of your thing. Like it was like Penny Arcade and PvP were like, you know, the big hitters at the time, and Penny Arcade was like I think like this is my sophomore or junior year is when they started having their own TV shows, and they were really kind of like making it big, and so everyone else was, and you know, like, you know, Kate Beaton, there was just like a lot of Octopus Pie, like big kind of names coming out of that time that were actually making a living and making a name for themselves. So I was trying to basically follow in their footsteps. And coming out of school with its degree in animation, it was like, it just became very obvious that, like, 2D animation practically isn't a thing anymore in our country. It's like Canada still has a couple studios that do 2D animation, but like other than working at some boutique kind of small places, you just weren't going to get a job actually doing 2D animation. And
you're talking like animation, right? Not storyboards or character
design.
Exactly,
like actually animating, you know,
right?
Because that was what my degree was in, was actual, you know, animation.
Right.
And as an aside, which is I think why our storyboard artists problem has kind of cropped up in our industry where everyone is kind of overdoing their boards, because I feel like everyone is in this similar situation where they wanted to be cartoonists. Maybe. But there's no actual jobs for us, so everyone just says, "Well, I'll just animate my storyboard," and that's the same thing. Yeah. But that's an aside topic that maybe we can come back to. Sure. But yeah, so I finished school, and it just became obvious that like I was not going to get a 2D animation job anywhere. I like 3D animation, but I didn't want to make a career out of it. The most like important, like the thing I wanted to do the most was tell my own stories. And that's the kind of thing that you're just not going to be able to do working in animation, right? Like, unless you are supremely lucky and get a show, signed. And then even then, if you get a show, like the possibility that it'll turn into what you actually want it to be is also slim to nil. Especially if you want to do like teen based or focused kind of action stuff. It's just like, it's not like an environment where that stuff really flies or you have a great chance of making it happen. So instead of pursuing that, excuse me, I'm sipping my coffee. I just decided I'll keep trying to do box hockey and see if I can make a thing out of it. So I did that for a couple of years, and it went okay. Like, I made a living. I was alive, but it was like, I can talk.
But at what cost?
Well, and it's like the amount of work I'm fine with. I'm like a habitual and somewhat infamous overworker, like the amount of work that it takes to do a webcomic is insane. But like, I'm okay with that. Like, I like making things. But the problem was just that I couldn't find the way to make it work in the way that other people had. I think, like, as you said, Gene, like, I had to put a really big focus on like making it look really, really good, right? Like, I wanted to, this is another kind of habit of mine, is I always want to keep learning. And so as I was making this comic, it became really hard for me to ever keep it in one place visually, right? It was like, I can't do this thing where I do, the same 6 panels every day, and it's in black and white, and it's just like the kind of key to success on a comic that comes out on a regular basis like that is to try and simplify it as much as possible to get it out. Sure. And I was just doing the exact opposite, where I was like, well, I want to learn how to paint, I want to learn how to render really well. I want to learn cinematic framing and layout and all this stuff. And I want to work on my draftsmanship so I can like actually draw well and all that stuff. And all these goals that I had for like personal growth just kept getting in the way of actually finishing a comic on time. And it becomes hard for both I think for me and for the audience to really follow a story when it keeps stopping so often. It's like there were a lot of really great hardcore fans and readers that I'm really grateful for, but I was never able to create the audience that I needed to survive on, and so I eventually just started looking for more proper paid comics work. I think we can do a new page, by the way. Yeah.
I'm gonna try to do the Sonic Adventure pose from the front. That was one of the prompts, and this is now my challenge.
Sure.
But anyway.
Yeah. So I started taking little like cover work jobs or interior work jobs or colorist jobs. And I'll talk numbers here a little bit. I'm not ashamed of that. But like when I was doing boxer hockey, like my annual income was like generally under 30K,
Wow.
Which is not good. It's like it's I could live off it, because I had a cheap apartment and I just don't spend a lot of money.
I was going to ask you, where did you live at that point? Like, kind of what state, or like, were you in the big city? Were you in like a smaller city?
So after college, I moved back to Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I grew up, and I stayed there for a couple years. And then my girlfriend at the time got a job in Oregon after a couple years, so we both moved up to Eugene, Oregon, and then we were there for about 3 years before I came down to LA. So LA was by the time I got to LA, box hockey was all but unfunctioning, but I was living in places where I could afford to have that low amount of income. But at the same time, it was like I was living, but I was not able to ever go see a doctor or a dentist.
That's rough. Yeah.
I had no savings account. It was very kind of hand to mouth kind of stuff. Where it's like I would get to the end of the month and it would be like, oh God, I have $500 in my checking account. How am I gonna pay rent? And like you just kind of have to make it happen somehow. It's like every month was a miracle kind of thing.
Right.
And it's like, as much as I love doing like box jockey and webcomic and selling my own stuff, it's like it's kind of a young man's game, right? It's like I think you can only do that kind of living for so long. Like you get to a point where it's like I have to see the doctor, like I have to see a dentist. I have to think about like retiring one day, like and all this stuff was just not even like there was like days where I was like, man, my allergies are bad and I can't afford a box of tissues, right? It's like it's just like that's that kind of life. And I think maybe if you and even then I was only able to afford it because I had a partner, splitting the bills with me, but I at no point would ever let my pride let her take care of anything more than her half, but I think and my parents couldn't pay for anything. Like I got, never got any money from my parents or anything like that. So it was just like, there was no safety net at any point. And it was just like, it just became time to like, be like, this can't go on forever. So, I started doing some colorist work for comics to start. And it's like, as soon as I started doing that, it's like, even though comic artists get paid beans compared to what they should be getting paid, it was still like, holy moly, $1,000. like
$1,000 bill.
I know,
but
yeah.
And by the way, like, how are you making income from your webcomic? Like, because at the time, were you doing Patreon? What was how were you monetizing it?
And that's the thing.
Yeah.
If Patreon had been around, it could be a totally different story right now. But it's like those kind of income methods just weren't around at all. So you had to live off of ad sales, which were peanuts. It's like truly nothing.
I see.
And merchandise, and that was kind of it. So you had to have books to sell, T-shirts to sell, and all that stuff cost money to make. So it's not even just like, you can't just get money for nothing. You have to somehow, when you're making almost nothing, build up enough money to make a book or a T-shirt and then get it printed and then ship it out. And, it's just, it's so different now that, I don't know, if I was getting into it now, it would be a totally different story. But at the same time, it's much harder to make a name for yourself now, I feel like. I feel like I got in with the best crowd when I was doing it. It was like this kind of lifestyle, this like art form of webcomics was so new that not a lot of people had perfected the methodology of it, that I feel like it was just easier to stand out with good art. And now it's like, there are people that are such good illustrators, like it's incredible, and they're still not able to somehow carve a name for themselves because it's just not enough now. It's like I don't know what the X factor is anymore to making it out here, because again, I'm just not in that scene anymore. But I feel like it was easier for me back then, just because so few people were doing webcomics with really elaborate illustrations. It was much more of a penny arcade kind or PvP kind of setup where it was more simple art generally.
Yeah.
Where was I?
Yeah, you were starting to do commission work like color and for comics.
Yeah. So and again, it was like, comics don't pay a lot of money, but it was like a regular income, and it was like, finally, this feels somewhat secure. So I kept doing that for a little while, mostly colors, but sometimes interiors. I got involved with like Boom Comics, doing like their Gumball stuff. I was doing their Bravest Warriors covers and this and that. Then that eventually led to doing the Sonic stuff, which it truly just happened because I was at San Diego Comic-Con like doing boxer, I had a table for boxer hockey, and then one of the artists for the Archie Sonic comics came up, this guy named John Gray, and just said, "Hey, you should come over and meet our editor." And I said, "Sure, why not?" And like, I don't have like a lot of confidence in myself. I never actually pitch myself. I've never like applied for a job or like put myself out there,
yeah.
because I think I'm too scared of the rejection that I don't actually like. I never like, I would never go up to someone and said, "Hey, let me work on your book," or like, "Hey, could I work on your book?" or like, "Here's my portfolio." It's like, I feel like if I stop myself from doing that because I'm afraid that they'll say no, you know? So like how
Tyson Hess has a hard time with that. I don't know how the rest of us are going to,
I mean, I don't know.
Are going to be able to.
It's, and maybe it's ego or it's just like fear, but either way, it's just, it's really hard for me to like actually put myself out there like that.
I think it's great to hear. I think, you know, I think everyone, it just goes to show that everyone goes through the same cycles of like, you know, not feeling good enough, and and your career is proof that that is very much not true. And the fact, to me, I feel like if people are always reaching out to you for jobs, that's amazing. Like the fact that you've never had to pitch yourself.
Is I'm very
great.
Lucky. I mean, I owe
That's
everything
deserved.
to everyone that else, or everyone that's ever given me a chance, is where all the credit goes to, because I never would have been in Sonic stuff at all if it wasn't for John saying like, "Hey, you should just come ask if you can do a cover." Like that never would have crossed my mind to like do that, you know. But that worked out. So I started doing some covers for them, and then eventually had to.
And were you like, were you a fan of Sonic, or
God, yes.
Yeah.
Like Tyson, a fan of Sonic.
Yeah, I think I had, you know, even while doing boxer hockey, I had kind of had a name for myself somewhat infamously as a Sonic fan. And I say not famously, but infamously, because
is this when we talk about the Sonic
the meme comics? I mean, it can go back further than that, because I think one of the reasons why those took off was because I already had a fan base of Sonic fans from way back in the day. Like when I was 15, 16 years old, I was doing a Sonic Sprite comic called Sonic Arg.
God, remember that? Remember Sprite comics?
Yeah.
What a time.
And I guess, again, like looking at patterns, one of the reasons why my Sprite comic got to be popular is because, not being content with just using the sprites from the games, I made my own Sonic sprites.
Right.
And like I made them to be, you know, more expressive and just a little bit bigger, and just to do stuff that you couldn't do from copying and pasting sprites from the games. These were called Ritsified. Which is a story I'm not going to go into, but
I've never heard that.
But like these sprites became really popular because like other people wanted to start using them, so I put them out there for people to use, and that's how like people started kind of knowing my name for the first time in Sonic Land.
Yeah.
And so when I did those funny face Sonic things for boxer hockey, I had already had kind of a built-in Sonic fan base that I think were there to kind of help spread it around. Which was just, I mean, it was not intentional at all. Like, those comics were truly, I did that first one just thinking, like, wouldn't it be funny if Sonic was fed up with Robotnik? And it was like, you know, Robotnik is up to his stuff. He's putting robots and animals, and Sonic just doesn't care. And that was kind of it. It was really like, I drew it on, like, a single piece of 8.5 by 11 paper in class one day, and then like I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna tweet this or whatever, and then that's gonna be the end of it. But for whatever reason, it really took off. I think it's weird looking back now, like to think like why they were popular, but at the time, like people really weren't doing this kind of thing with Sonic.
Totally,
you know,
yeah.
It's like it's spawned so many imitators over the years that it feels trite now looking back, but at the time, it wasn't a thing that you saw.
Yeah.
Like
Sonic
it wasn't
a meme yet,
right? It wasn't necessarily making fun of Sonic. Like that wasn't the intent. It was just kind of parodying it in a way that I think it was obvious that I knew about Sonic, and it wasn't just like, I think like kind of how it's become now is like people that don't actually like Sonic or don't actually care about Sonic make this kind of thing, and it's just really exhausting. where it's like
it's like the whole like Shrek thing. Like,
exactly,
it's part of that whole
It's like people that make Shrek jokes don't actually like
Garfield.
Shrek, right? Like it's just this like there's certain properties that people latch onto, and it's like you can smell the same old jokes, the same old gotta go fast jokes, the same old like, it's like what if Mario ate a shroom and got high joke? You know, it's just like the same old trite shit. Like what if Knuckles was a big jock? It's like I don't know. And so I think the reason why those took off was because, one, people weren't really doing them at the time, so it was really novel to kind of see something like that with Sonic characters. But I think also you could tell, like, reading through all of them, that I wasn't just, like, searching Wikipedia for things to make fun of Sonic for, right? It was like I actually knew the games, I actually knew the characters, and I was just, like, just kind of pushing them to 11 just to make some funny faces and stuff like that.
I think that comes through. People can sense that something's from the heart,
Yeah.
and that you are part of the fandom, and that it is like lampooning something that you love. I think that always shows. That always comes through.
Yeah, like I've seen just again 100 kind of imitators of like as soon as those went big, a bunch of people started drawing. No, I'm going to draw a funny face Sonic thing.
Yeah,
and it was just none of the jokes were like from the heart. Like it was truly just like, here's a really jacked Knuckles, and it's like, okay, funny bit, dude. Like, I don't know.
It's easy. It's easy.
It's exactly. So anyway, but those really took off, in a kind of very big meme-y kind of way. And true to my fashion, I didn't want to lean into success. So instead of doing them forever or pivoting to more meme-y kind of faces, and also at the time, memes weren't as big of a thing like that. I think that's the other thing people don't really realize looking back, is I think reaction face culture wasn't a thing outside of 4chan. Twitter was still really new. People weren't really doing reaction faces on Twitter, that kind of thing. Like people weren't really doing it on Facebook. Like outside of 4chan, you just didn't copy paste reaction faces.
A little bit on DeviantArt, but not that much.
Yeah. So it just wasn't as big of a thing, That's I think another reason why they kind of took off a little bit was it spread that culture outward a little bit. But either way, it was like, these are really popular, but this isn't mine. It's like I'm getting popular for doing Sonic stuff, and I don't want that. Like I want to, I want to make my stories. I want to make my webcomics. So it's like I did 5 of them, and I was like, that's it. You get no more. Like sorry, like everyone for years was like, make more funny Sonic comics. Har har har. And I was like, nope. Sorry, I'm allergic to success. Don't you understand?
Well, I think that I don't know. I think that's smart, because I think that there's diminishing returns with that kind of shit, and eventually people are just gonna call you that. You're the guy that does those funny Sonic things. You're hurting yourself. You're hurting your own growth as an artist, and no, I think it's smart. You go out while you're on top with anything. That's always the move.
I mean, that was the main reason why I didn't do more of them, was because they were so dialed up to the extreme on every panel. It's like every panel is a joke. Every moment is goes super hard and all that stuff. And it's like you can't do that for long.
Right.
It's kind of like. There's I don't know if you've ever seen it's like the Judd Apatow comedy problem, right? Where it's like he makes these movies that are 2.5 hours long, but they're comedies, and at some point you just get tired of laughing.
Yeah,
it's like a comedy kind of has to come and go and give you a chance to refresh. And that's the way I felt about those, where it was like these won't make you laugh forever if I just keep doing them, right? It's surface level comedy. There's no depth here, so you're not going to tune in and laugh at the same joke more than 5 times or whatever. So it's just like, they got to go, and so they did.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but so I got those printed out when I made my first run of Box Rocky books. It was the printer that was printing my Box Rocky books. It was like, you got anything else you want to throw on there while we're at it? And I'm like, sure, why not? It cost me $0.25 or something to print one of these little Sonic books as a little zine print thing. I'll throw them on there, and I'll kind of give them away. I sold them with the Box Rocky books, but they're also cheap enough that I could just give them away as a like give away if I felt like it sometimes. And so at San Diego, I gave one of them to the Archie people, which they thought was funny. And so they, that was one of the kind of icebreakers that got me in to do covers. But then I also gave them to a guy named Aaron Weber, who was the social media manager for Sonic stuff. He was over there promoting Sonic Lost World, and I walked over there and I played Lost World, and I said, "Hey, you want this funny goof 'em up book? It's free." And that was kind of it. But he said he took it back, and like everyone at Sega thought it was really funny, and they laughed at it for a while. And as I kind of kept working with Archie, I was simultaneously making a name for myself as drawing normal Sonic stuff as well. So I think like they kind of picked up that I can draw Sonic as he normally is, and not just with silly SpongeBob faces or whatever. And so when they were working on Sonic Mania, Aaron came up and asked me, he's like, "Hey man, so we want to do a commercial for Sonic Mania, and we want to do an animated, like a 2D animated classic Sonic animated short thing." And it's like, "Can you do that?" Like technically I was like, I can do it, but like this is also one of my recurring patterns is when somebody asks me if I can do something, I just say yes, and then I figure it out later. So it's like over the course of all this Sonic stuff, like I've learned how to composite in After Effects. I've learned sound design. I've learned editing. I've learned just like things that I need to know to get these things done. I will just learn as needed to get them done. So it's like, they gave us a budget to make this thing. I partnered up with Studio Yada, who I'm sure you're familiar with the Yada people. Did Yada do Planet Panic stuff for you?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, I figured. But great bunch of folks. We kind of split the duties up a little bit to make it work. It was like, in retrospect, I should have asked for a lot more money. I'm not going to throw numbers out for this. I think I'd get in trouble, but it's like, Sega gave me a number, and me never having done this before, said, "Yeah, sure, that sounds like a fine enough amount of money. Let me go around and ask people." And, I asked Yada, and they said, "Sure, we can make that happen." And then just over the course of things, it just became obvious that it wasn't enough money, Like I should have asked for way more. But again, this is the danger of hiring someone who doesn't know what they're doing. And so just this is where I learned that when push comes to shove, I have to pick up the slack a little bit. And this is something that I wish I had been in charge of more projects before the Yada stuff happened, because I would have done a much better job of protecting them and picking up these promises that I had made, basically. But I did my best at that time. But even so, it's like I wish I had known before how much work it was going to be, how much money people should have been paying for it or getting paid for it. We can do a new page. Yeah. But it became obvious, like in the middle of the project, that it wasn't enough, and so I'm going to have to pick up the slack here. And so that was again like where this pattern started forming, where I started animating a lot of the shots myself, or like doing a lot of red lines and revisions. Like basically, it got to a point where it's like I couldn't ask them to do retakes or clean up a shot if it wasn't kind of up to Sega standards or whatever. It was like I just had to take it back and then fix it up myself, and then sometimes do compositing myself. I think like originally Yada was slated to do all the compositing of the entire thing, and then we just had to kind of take it back because it was obvious again that it wasn't enough money for and time for all that stuff. It was like they were having trouble just meeting the deadline that we had set, like again on no fault of their own. It was just
I mean, they're a young studio at the time, and
right.
And,
I mean, it was two groups of young people not knowing what they were getting into. It was like,
it's and because I had similar things. I had to roll up my sleeves and really get dirty with the Planet Panic short too. Like there was, I think, maybe 50 or 60 shots in the short total, and I went in and worked on like 40 of them. Right. I basically took 2 weeks off work just to go in and fix a lot of things. And it's tough because I think I was in a similar boat as you. Like it was my first time directing something that was that professional, and didn't know how to lead as well. Yara was still pretty green and still figuring out their pipeline, and I remember you and I talking about that at the time. Like, you know, it was similar things where we were both, you and I were both just kind of figuring it out as we went.
Yeah, I mean, it was tricky, and it was like, you know, it was a tense time, but again, it was, as you said, it was just two kind of groups of youngsters biting off more than they thought. And had
it's
to
tough
chew
until
anyway.
you're in it. It's really tough to know. You know, it's experience comes with time, and like. But I think that I think those shorts came out really well. Like, yeah. I know you ended up doing a lot of that's like a lot of polish,
right?
But they came out really well, and I think the response was fucking great.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't be happier with how it all turned out.
It's how it goes. If you're passionate about a project, then like sometimes you have to get in. I think it's a sign of a good director, is somebody that, you know, isn't gonna pass the blame, isn't gonna give up on a thing. Like, you just roll up your sleeves and you get in there.
Yeah, I mean, it taught me a lot of lessons that, again, it's stuff that I wish I had known first, but it taught me a lot of stuff that I've carried forward into all future jobs that I'm glad now that I have it, just to know, again, not necessarily for myself and what I'm getting into, but like what I need to do to protect my people. Because that's the kind of thing where a director will very rarely have to answer for small mess ups, right? It's like you're at the top of the chain, and it's like the company needs you or whatever, so you can get like a slap on the wrist if something big happens or whatever, but you're safe, right? It's the smaller people that always suffer.
That's a good director should always just like fall on his sword, because
right.
Like I always feel responsible, and sometimes there's people who, you know, mess things up. Like sometimes
right, yeah.
it's an animator or it's whoever that wasn't doing a great job, but I would never allow that blame to fall on them, because
right.
It's like, it should have been me. I should have known. I should have predicted. I should have, you know, been smarter about my choices, like scope down where necessary.
I mean, I don't know. Like, you can't know everything. I think it's just it's easier though for the boss to eat the mistake than it is for the underling.
Underling.
I don't want to use that word, but the person lower down the ladder, right? Because I think it's
the workers.
Right, like you're at the end of the day, you're both going to learn a lesson, but like the director is able to walk away from a hard lesson easier than someone further down there, right? And it's like, so like for example, like there were some mistakes that happened on the Mania intro, and it's like, but I came away from them learning all those lessons and able to move forward, taking all that and putting it forward, right? But like a younger artist, if they had really like gotten into big trouble, it could have like put a complete stop to their career, right? And that's the kind of stuff that like again I'm glad to be present to now, where it's stuff that it's like my top priority is like I truly it's not like I don't care what Sega thinks of me or whatever like that, but it's like I can say a mistake is my fault and nothing will happen to me. But if I say, oh, this mistake was this person's fault, that could be the end for that person, you know?
That's very true.
So, that's the kind of stuff that,
the higher up the ladder you go, the more you're just taking the blows. Like, it really is. It's all about responsibility, and you're getting paid more money, and that's great. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that you have to weather every single shitty thing that happens. Like, that is where you need that fortitude, and you need to have empathy, and just like and a lot of people, they're not interested in moving up the ladder because they think they realize how difficult it would be on their psyche, on them, and that's totally fine. Like, nobody should ever feel, this is totally a tangent, but something that I thought about is like, not everyone is cut out to be directing, and that's totally fine. Like, it's not for everybody, and I've seen it happen where somebody gets moved up to directing in animation and they really struggle because they don't have that skill set, and like maybe they don't have the emotional the fortitude or something, and like that's okay. Like, that's totally fine. I wanted to throw that out there because I think I've seen that happen. I've seen it happen where directors
it's also a lot of like, it's just also like a lot of work, like Tyson, you were saying. It's like you just have to go in the, you know, like sometimes there's just no time for notes, and you have to do them yourself, because it's just like, you know, when time's running out. And that's why, I don't know, like you were like designated as a director, is like you can pick up the slack when there is slack, kind of thing. I mean, that's kind of how I see my role as a director as well, is like, you know, you have a team, they help you get to a certain extent, and then you know, you're the one in charge to make sure like everything is at a certain level of quality. And sometimes like you have to be the one that has all the solutions, that to kind of like make it happen.
Yeah.
I mean, well, it's one of two things. You have to either accept that you're not going to get your note addressed, or do it yourself. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Those are my
exactly.
two ways of approaching a problem. Is like you have you have a window where you're allowed to give notes. You know, that's expected.
That's very
it's part
true.
of the process. But I think where a lot of directors kind of falter or take advantage of their crew is that they keep that window open far too long. You know,
I think I want to highlight that, because that's a really good point. I think that there is a window of notes, and I've been on the other end of that as well, where it's just like, come on, like move on from this.
Like you get one shot, you know, basically like make your intent clear, give your note, and then move on, right? But it's like if it depends on the thing too. Like feature, you get a much longer time frame, you get more trial and error. But like on TV shows, it's like or shorts, you know, depending on the short and the time frame, it's just like you just got to keep moving, right? And you can get your note addressed at the expense of like the life of your crew, but you shouldn't. You know, I think that the trouble is that so few directors have climbed through the ranks, and I think that's a thing that would benefit kind of everyone, is just a little more experience at what the note you're giving actually entails. Because I think that's something that a lot of directors that have just kind of been placed into their position don't understand, is everything you ask for comes with a certain weight, you know? And so when you ask for something, you need to mentally be accounting for how much weight is this going to add to the project. Because a lot of people will just willy-nilly give out notes with no accounting for how much work they're actually asking for, you know. And that will absolutely kill crews. And that's kind of stuff where it's like, if there's a little minor note, you know, that could be addressed in like 20 minutes or whatever, I'll ask for it. If it's a note that like I really, really want, but I know it's going to take a full day of work for someone to pick up the slack, is like, you know, I just got to let it go. Because it's just, but that's, again, like that's the perspective that I am privileged to have, is that I know what I'm asking of people when I ask for it.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why it's really great to start on smaller projects, or to rise through like the ranks, because you've done all the jobs. Like currently, like for example, like on like, sorry, I'm just talking about myself for a second, but like the job that I'm on, like I'm doing as much storyboarding as my storyboard artist, so I know exactly what a note will take in terms of time, and I think that's pretty good. Because you know, when you have like a director that is removed from the reality of the work, 100%, it's very easy to not calculate properly how long a note is going to take for
I mean, there was I'll skirt the teetering edge of NDA territory here, but there was while we were on Sonic, and not Sonic, but there was a movie that was being done by our VFX studio that they had a director, and this is I'll just say this, it is an infamous VFX heavy motion picture that came out around the same time as the first Sonic movie. I'll say that. But our VFX studio was also doing all the character animation and stuff for that movie. But their director who also is an infamous jackass, like of a director.
Mhm.
Like, like nobody likes this guy. He's like famously hated, but he's rich and white, so he gets to keep making movies.
Yeah, it's a pass.
Yeah, but so they were making this movie right next to us, and it was like a palpable aura of misery over this team, because like we'd be sitting there, I'd be sitting there with our modeler making the Sonic model, and then like right next to us, this team making this movie, you'd be like, okay, Mr. Director, I won't say his name. He's like he asked for this stuff to be changed, and like everyone was like, but that's impossible. We can't do that. And he's like, but this is what he asked for. This is what we have to do. And it's like just the misery of every note that would come in from this guy, because he didn't understand what he was asking for. It was like 11th hour huge changes to like big parts that like completely disrupt the VFX chain. But this guy did not know what he was asking for, because he had no experience. He had never directed a VFX vehicle like this before. And
Wow.
that's, like there's stories of, or I guess let's say myths of the Sonic 1 movie crew. And it's like, oh, this poor team that had to reanimate the whole movie. It's all, first of all, bullshit. It didn't happen. Didn't have to reanimate the whole movie. But our director grew up in VFX. Like he was doing VFX for his job for like 10 years or so before he got Sonic, So he knows the pipeline. He knows how to like prepare the production for success. And he knows how to make sure that the team can handle it. And it's not to say that it wasn't also a difficult job. Every big VFX movie is a difficult job. But it's like it was just night and day between our production and this other production when you like the leadership knows what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah.
So that's just the leadership conundrum is you want to have it your way, but you have to respect the people below you.
Exactly.
100%. We kind of glazed over Diesel, and I think that I would love to hear your thoughts on Diesel and what was like the conception of that like, and a little bit about that process.
Sure. So Diesel I actually started Diesel when I was in college. I had gotten to this point where my professors were just suggesting that I do independent study, because the actual courses weren't teaching me that much anymore. And that's not to say that I'm some animator savant or whatever. It's like not by a long shot. It was just that the courses were teaching me skills that I already knew. I wasn't the best at them, but I knew them, so it was like taking a class where the professor teaches me like what an arc is or whatever. It's like it's a waste of my time. And so it's just like we gotta find a better way to spend my money. So my professors recommended that I just do independent study, which is you basically create your curriculum. Like, what do you want to learn? And then we'll set you up with a professor to teach you how to do it. So I had been doing Box Rocky for 3 years at that point. So I'd done web comics, but I didn't know anything about actual comics at all. So I didn't know how to like format a page or write a script, all that stuff. It's just when you do it all on your own, you create your own methods, and then you do it willy nilly as you need to. But I wanted to know, like, if I want to do comics, how do I actually like work in the system, right? So it's like, how do I pitch to a publisher? How do I prepare files for a publisher? All that fun stuff. So that's what I asked for. I said I want to do a comic book, and so they said, okay, come up with a comic that you want to do, and we'll just make a full comic book. And that's where Diesel came from. It had been some sketches that I had in my sketchbook for a while, where I just was doodling these characters, and it kind of became like a dumping ground for a bunch of characters that I had created but didn't know where to put them. And that's why Diesel is kind of the way it is. It's kind of like a trash punk aesthetic where I throw literally everything I have into the same pot, right? So like the disharmony is the point kind of thing. so I took all these characters, made this story, we made this comic, and then I had this 30-page black and white comic that I had put together, and by the time I graduated, it was just this thing I had. So I got a bunch of them printed up to pitch to publishers, and then after working with Boom Comics on the Gumball books for a while, they asked if I had any originals I wanted to pitch, and so I pitched Diesel, and we worked together on that for a while, and it was fine. Like it was like I really, really liked doing it, and I wanted to keep doing it. If it wasn't for Sonic, I might have kept doing it. But the same problem was arising where it was just like, it took me a full year to make the first Diesel graphic novel, and I think like the pay, let's just say it was under $20,000. Let's say it was significantly under $20,000. And like, I was just in this point where it was like, well, how am I going to do this now? Cause I was already in LA at that point. I had been storyboarding for Frederator on Bravest Warriors. I had done the Zim movie at that point. And Zim on 6 months on Zim, I had earned triple what the entire Diesel book had earned. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And this isn't just like money. This is like thinking like cost of living in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a studio.
It's the bare
apartment.
minimum, honestly.
Right. It's like I had a studio apartment in Koreatown. I wanted to move in with my then girlfriend, now wife, but I didn't want and would not allow myself to be in a position where I'm asking her to pay for rent while I follow my dream or whatever. It's just like, it's not, I can't live that way. So it's like, I have to make money if I want to continue to live here and like be happy and healthy. And again, I hadn't had health insurance. I think at that point, I still hadn't been to a doctor in like 10 years. Still hadn't been to there was like a 12-year span where I didn't go to the dentist because I couldn't afford it. And storyboarding, while it's a decent living. It's not like super great money, but it's a decent living. It's enough for you to live in this city. It's like I gotta keep doing this. And then like the Sonic stuff, like the time frame of it was, first Diesel book came out. Immediately after the first Diesel book wrapped, the Sonic Mania intro thing happened. And then as soon as the Mania intro wrapped, Zim happened. And so like one after the other, these opportunities that I just couldn't say no to kept popping up. And Boom was they wanted to do another volume. But it was like, I can't not do a Sonic cartoon, right? And then like Zim happened. It's like, I can't not do a Zim cartoon, right? Like, and then when Zim was over, it was this option of, do I go back and do more Diesel and make like not barely enough money to survive in this city, or do I keep following the Sonic stuff for a little while and then go back to Diesel, or find a way to keep doing it all? And it got to this point where it's like, when I was ready to go back to Diesel, the iron had cooled a little too much, and Boom was like, no thanks. And so it's like my options now are I can get the property back, but then what do I do with it? Like I can't pitch it in this environment. Nobody wants to make an expensive action cartoon right now.
Nope.
I don't know how to make a living off it as a comic. And it's like, I already work 12 hours a day, right? It's like, if there was time for me to do a webcomic, like even in my evenings, I would do it. I don't think people realize like how actually insane my work, I don't want to say ethic, because it's not ethic, it's a compulsion. It's an addiction.
Yeah.
It's like, while I was working full time on Sonic 2 as the storyboard supervisor and like just head of story, they gave me co-producer on Sonic 2 because I did too many jobs for them to give me one title. Basically, it was like it just got to a point where it was like, you're a producer because you've done too much on this thing. But it's like, so while I was doing all that on Sonic 2, I still directed 5 shorts. in that time span. Like, it's there. I don't have time to do anything else. It's like, I just, there's no way I can fit a comic into all this now.
Right. It's like, would you say like your hours are like the first thing you do in the morning is like you start working and then that's the last thing that you do before you fall asleep?
I mean,
is it that kind?
My schedule on Sonic 2, I mean, it was literally, I would wake up I would get into Zoom calls at 9 in the morning, and I would be on Sonic Zoom calls until like 7 or 8 at night sometimes.
Oh wow, yeah.
And then as soon as those were done, I would have to then immediately I'd grab dinner, and then I would start working on one of my other shorts that I was directing. Like I was like I did 4 shorts for Sega during that time, and then I also directed a short for a Chinese company at the time. So it was like, and these were not small projects. These were big things, and it's just like from not even sunrise to sunset, from waking up to going to bed, it was just like work, and I did that for almost 2 years straight.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I mean, that's rough. That's rough. Like I hope you're taking care of yourself, because that could really pile up.
I mean, I kind of understand that. Like, I do understand, because it is a thing where it's like, well, those are like dream opportunities. Like you were excited to do these projects, right?
I mean, some of them were just like, some of them weren't very exciting at all. But it's like, this is where I have to say, this is not work ethic. It's just like
workaholism.
It really is. It's just like I have to fill every moment with work for some reason.
Do you feel like it's because coming from comics where it was like hard making a living, now it's like you can't turn down anything?
Very possible that it started there. Whereas like, I mean, that's kind of it exactly, right? Like you can't say no, because what if the next thing doesn't come?
Totally. That's that freelance life. Yeah,
right.
It kind of like digs it inside of you, and then it's hard to unpack.
Yeah.
Like that's tough, man.
Like, but it's not, I don't know. I wasn't like depressed at this time. Like it was like, it was a lot of work. But at the same time, every minute was kind of exhilarating in that way. Right. Like one of the reasons why I like working on the Sonic movies so much is because not only do I have a lot of different responsibilities, but like I get a lot of different responsibilities, so it's like I'd wake up one day and they're like, hey, we rewrote this scene, can you storyboard it for us right now? And I'm like, sure. And then like, oh, and by the way, when you're done with that, we need all these props designed. It's like, okay, great. And then and they're also, the studio's waiting on notes from the character models. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, oh, like we need these the advertising renders need to have notes done on them, so get that done too. So it's like there were days on the Sonic movie where I was like working for 5 different departments at the same time, and like everyone needed everything done yesterday kind of time frame. And for me, that's like the moments where I feel most alive. It's the kind of stuff where I know a lot of people would be like, oh my God, I'm gonna fucking die. Like this is too much for me. Like I can't handle all this pressure. But for me, it's like, these are like the times when it's like, I don't know who else can do this, so it's like I'm getting an ego boost that like I'm pulling all this off right now.
No, same hat, man. I it's especially I'm gonna talk about myself a little bit just to relate, but like the pandemic was really tough because I lost the ability to work on a lot of the stuff that I was working on and a lot of the stuff that I had momentum on. And so as soon as things started happening again, this whole year so far, it's been like 5 different projects, and like I've talked about it on Twitter and stuff, but it's like, it's great because there's times where I'm like completely beat to shit and I'm exhausted, but it's great because a lot of this stuff, it comes down to me. And so it's like you said, it's like there's a sense of responsibility and maybe there is a bit of ego boosting, but it's like it's making up, maybe for me it's making up for lost time, but I get the feeling of the thrill of it. I think that especially like we've worked so many years to get to these positions, right, where like people are looking to us for answers and for progress, and like it feels good. It feels good,
Yeah.
and but yeah, trying to you gotta draw a line at some point, I think, because the burnout's real, and like it can catch up with you.
But
as
there's
well.
also this thing where it's like, when you work on a project that you really enjoy and that you love, like, I don't know, like the hours don't feel the same. I don't know. Like, I mean, that's the reason why I was asking you, like much earlier on in the interview, like if you were a Sonic fan, because it's like, if you're a fan, like it's so much more fun than, like, it is, like, yes, it is a job, but it's also like you're drawing something that you enjoy drawing, I guess.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I have complicated feelings on that specifically, just because it can really, that pendulum can swing really hard one way or the other when you're a fan. It's like, because on the one hand, like, I think at the start, on like maybe your first project, the thrill of working for Sonic can really carry you through it, right? It's like, oh, this is difficult, but whatever, I'm doing a Sonic thing. Like, yeah, it's great. Like, that doesn't really last more than one or two projects, like before you're just used to it, right? Like I've been doing Sonic stuff now, like for 5-ish years or whatever. Like that, the fan aspect of it doesn't carry you that long, and what it eventually can actually turn into, and this is the dangerous part of working on a property that you really like, is that a fan comes into a job like this with their own ideas. And that's the danger zone, right? Because I come into Sonic thinking about, like, it's no mystery that Sonic has had, some turbulent years here and there or whatever. Yeah. And so it's like when I come into it, I think of all the things that, man, if I was in charge of Sonic, what would I do? And like to make it right? Like in my mind, I have all the answers for how to make Sonic a big success and how to fix all the problems that he's had over the years. And so I get in there, and immediately I'm thinking, man, here it is. Here's my chance. I'm gonna do this all right now, And the problem is that you don't have any power to actually do that. This is still a very, very tightly controlled property by a giant corporation who is, like, the character is still overseen by people that have been overseeing him for 25+ years now. And so they're the ones who have the ideas on what Sonic is and what he needs to be, right? So it's like little parts of me squeak through on each project, but like by and large, it's still their show,
Yeah.
Right.
And that can really, really do a number on your brain, because then people are looking at the stuff that you put out and thinking, oh, this is a Tyson production, and it's like look at this, you can tell he did this, and it's like, oh man, why did he do this? And I'm like, oh man, you got no friggin' clue.
I see now why you cringed at me saying that earlier. Now I get it.
Like, it's the thing where, like, yes, like little parts of me get through, but like people have this impression that, like, for example, like that I want Sonic to be this loosey-goosey kind of Tom and Jerry goofy cartoon show or whatever, like, because that's what the first couple of projects that we did at Sega were. And it's like one of the most difficult times I had in recent memory was the making of the racing shorts that we did, because I didn't want them to be funny at all. Like, I wanted them to be cool and character driven, and I wrote scripts that were all about the characters and how they learned to get along. I wanted to have dialogue. Like, I wanted it to be this kind of cool teen focused thing, and like all that got thrown out, right? So it was like, and then immediately I was like, oh, but we can't just do the thing we just did. Like, this is, again, like, anyone that knows anything about me or has followed me for any amount of time knows that I don't do the same thing twice, right? It's just like, it is not in my nature. Just like how we said about like the funny face Sonic comics, or like I can only do the same trick once before I worry that people are going to catch on to my tricks, And so when it came time to do these racing cartoons, it was like, you're asking me to do the same show I just did, but I just did that, right? And it was like, it was really, really difficult. Like, those shorts, like, I won't speak to how they came out. I'm very, very happy and proud of everyone that worked on them, but it's like, that was one of the most difficult times of my life, where it was like, I'm in the Sonic sphere now. It's like people know my name, and my sophomore project now is something that I don't want to do at all. But it's what people are gonna like when you do the same thing twice. Then people start to look for that as your pattern, right? So it's like, oh, Sonic or Tyson likes to do funny face Sonic cartoons, right? So that's what he is. And it's like, no, you don't understand. I don't want to do this, but I have to, because that's what was being forced, or not forced, but that's what's being asked of me, right? It's like, it's not like this is the Tyson show now. It's still the Sega show, and I do what they ask of me. Like, having director as my title doesn't mean that I make the decisions.
Right.
And so
no, that's good to hear. I think it's I think that's very important. I think they're still going to hold the IP. They're still going to have the money, and yeah, I mean, you're just working for them,
right? But if I wasn't a Sonic fan, that kind of decision wouldn't be so hard, right? Because it doesn't come with all the baggage of what I wanted to see Sonic be for years and years and years, right? If I'm just some cartoon maker that Sega approaches and is like, hey, do you want to make a Sonic cartoon? I'd be like, okay, great. You want it to be funny? Fine, I'll do that. Like, in a car, sure. What the hell? I don't know anything about these characters. I'll do whatever you say. But for me as a fan who, again, has been like waiting his whole life to realize dreams of what I want to see, it's like you might as well be pulling my teeth out with no anesthesia. It's just like you're. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, because you're a hardcore fan.
Oh God! Like there's nothing casual about like my love for Sonic. Like I am a walking Wikipedia. Like I have reminded Sonic Team of things they've forgotten on like more than a regular basis.
It's just a job for them, but you're in this shit.
Exactly. I mean, like even on the movie, for example, that's one of the reasons why when they first realized that, we're just going to keep him around, was like they would have questions, and I would be like, I would hear them in the next room like asking questions about like, oh, well, what does Knuckles deal with here, or like, oh, we need like a species of character that comes from this place or whatever, and like I would just poke my head in the room and be like, well, actually,
that's great.
Yeah, like
amazing.
there's truly, it's not like, oh yeah, I'm a Sonic fan. It's like, no, I'm a freaking like embarrassing Sonic fan, and so like the opportunity to work on this stuff, that's where it becomes like a double-edged blade. Like everyone that's sitting out there thinking that, oh man, if I was in charge of Sonic, I would fix it, I would do all this stuff, I know exactly what I would do. It's like, you have no friggin' clue. You wouldn't get to do anything.
No,
like,
it takes so much to push through any decisions, I'm sure. Like I can imagine.
Do you feel like this is just a random question, but do you feel like the execs appreciate that you have so much Sonic knowledge, or do you feel like sometimes maybe it gets in the way of the job? You don't have to answer.
From like the Sega side, or from like the Paramount side?
Both.
Interesting.
I guess.
I think. I think they both appreciate it. I think it's just, like I don't really have a lot of kind of heated interactions with anyone. I recognize the chain O command, as it were, where it's like, even if I'm director, I'm still not the executive at the top of the thing, right? So it's like I always give my opinion on what I think should be done or needs to happen, but at the end of the day, when it's their money and it's their thing, so it's like I will acquiesce to what they ask to be done, because if I didn't, then I would be gone and someone else would be doing exactly what they were being asked to be done. So I think from their perspective, especially from like Sega's perspective, I think it's been very helpful for them to not have to give a lot of notes they usually have to give. Like,
oh, nice.
Like a lot of times on projects, they're dealing with people that just don't know anything about the property, so they have to give all these really kind of silly surface level stuff. It's like, no, Knuckles is this tall, and like, oh no, Tails wouldn't do this, and all that stuff, and they don't have to do that stuff with me, like, ever. And so they save a lot of time, and also being able to speak like Japanese like means that we can give notes back and forth without a translator.
Oh, wait, you haven't talked about that at all. Okay, how did you learn Japanese? Like, was it a hobby? Did you learn it in college? You're just really fast.
No, yeah, I lived in Japan for a few years, and so I picked it.
Wow.
And so, like, I think, you know, for Sega, it's been a really great relationship for them just because of how few little hoops or extra hoops they have to jump through to get their thing done. It's like we'll still have differences of opinion on like what the like show should be, or like the tone, or like what the character would do, or whatever like that. But like at the end of the day, they're not giving notes on how Sonic's eyes work or this or that. You know, it's a bunch of stuff that they save a bunch of time and trouble by not having to deal with someone that isn't familiar with the property. So and they're like super appreciative. Like I, you know, it's difficult for me as a fan not being able to have like full creative control over this stuff, but like I wouldn't say or Sega is still like a great partner to work with. So, you know, I don't want to make that seem like it's the case where they're some ogres or whatever. It's there have always been very, very vocally and like publicly appreciative of our relationship. So it's never been at all a thing where I feel like they think it gets in the way or whatever. In Paramount, it's like one of the hugest boons to our relationship is just like, again, like they don't have to wonder if this thing that we're doing is going to get by Sega or not, because I'll tell them whether it's going to get by Sega or not, you know?
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
like,
you probably made yourself invaluable at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, there's a question like for on the movie, people don't really know like who I'm working for a lot of the time. Like, you know, the directors and the producers, they all know, but like a lot of the people like in the chain will be like, oh, so you're like the Sega guy, right? And I was like, no, I work for Paramount, you know, but because I know everything about Sonic and I have all these answers for all the Sonic related questions, people just assume that I'm like an inside guy for Sega that's like their babysitting or something like that.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's interesting. Wow. We ask our guests how they deal with creative block and what it feels like for them.
I may not be helpful here. I don't get creative block.
No, that's valid.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't know. I don't get creative block, and I don't get burned out. And I wish I had better answers for those that do. From an outsider's perspective, it's always seemed to me that getting creative block or getting burnt out is, and again, this is my armchair philosophy thing. So like, please do not take this as gospel. This is all just postulation. But it's always seemed to me like internally your mind is trying to tell you something that you don't want to hear. So that can be either that you don't actually like doing what you're doing, or you're not giving yourself enough time off, for example, or I guess like I know a lot of people that do this kind of thing for years and years before realizing they don't like doing it, you know, like, or they don't like doing the part of the process that they are doing, right? So it's like in comics, I know a lot of people were doing web comics that hated drawing, right? But they wouldn't admit they wouldn't admit that to themselves until they got a job writing, because and I think, you know, because they wouldn't let themselves think that, they thought that they had to draw, right? But as soon as their lifestyle changed to a point where they could be like, oh, I don't need to draw. Wow, I hated drawing, right? Like, and I think that's a big example, but I think it's a lot of like smaller decisions there that kind of apply, where it's like, you know, maybe you're not drawing what you actually want to draw, for example, you know, like your body is telling you to follow your passion, but like you're not letting yourself do that for whatever reason. Like either you're not making enough time to draw what you actually want to draw. Like do you like, are you feeling burnt out because you hate drawing comics, but what you really want to draw is just covers, you know? Like maybe you just like illustrating. Maybe you love drawing, but comics is something entirely different, and you're forcing yourself to draw that to make a living, but you actually hate it. It's like, again, this is a complete armchair psychology, but it's the kind of thing where I guess I think on a day-to-day basis, a lot of people aren't honest with themselves regarding what they really want, because they're afraid that it's going to rock their boat.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree with that.
100%,
I think that's
100%.
I think that's very well observed, honestly.
Like, difficult decisions are hard to make for a reason, right? Like, what if I had been doing this for 5 years, right? And I hated it, but coming to that realization meant that my entire foundation was pulled out from under me, right? What would I do? Right? What could I possibly do with my life if I suddenly realized I hate drawing cartoons? I don't know. I don't know what my next steps would be. Do I go back to school? Do I just have no job? Am I going to be homeless? It was like, coming to that kind of realization is so scary that your brain would stop you from coming to that realization to protect yourself, right? And again, that's a big example, but I think there's a lot of smaller decisions that are similar to that, where it's like, I don't want to realize this because it's going to make life harder for me.
Right.
And I think, that can come in the form of like relationships. Like, do I want to stay in this relationship? Like, oh man, I'm getting really kind of off the deep end here. But I think it's a lot of things are like that, where it's like you kind of make your mind think that you like something to protect your status quo a little bit. And I think when it comes to creative block, like the few times, like when I was younger, when I got it, it was because I was not letting myself draw the stuff that I actually wanted to draw. It was like, man, maybe this is the most clearest example of this, but it's like, for anyone out there that's an artist or likes to draw, is like, and you've been told to do like a still life painting of some fruit in a bowl or whatever like that, and it's like, I would rather die.
Yeah, I hate that shit.
It's like, that's the kind of thing where it's like, that's drawing, right? But it's not what you want to draw.
Yeah,
that's how you know whether or not you really like to draw.
Right. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to ever do still lifes, right? But if I had to do a bunch of still lifes, I would sit there and be like, oh my God, I'm so blocked up right now, right? Because
that's so funny.
Like, just because it's not what I want to be doing. And like, that's the kind of example where it's like a still life would be given to you as an assignment. But a job is very similar to that, where it's like your job is your assignment, right? And so it's like, if every day you're given this thing where it's like, you have to storyboard today, and it's like, okay, I told myself I wanted to be a storyboard artist, so here I am. But it's like, in reality, maybe you actually don't like storyboarding, right? Like,
I mean, that was my journey the last like 3 years. Is I thought that I needed to do boards to advance my career and advance my development of my show, and like, holy shit, I was not cut out for it. Like, I can do it, but I was miserable the whole time.
Yeah, it's like, it's not a matter of ability at all. And that's not. I guess I really hope that that's not what I'm implying here either. Is like, it doesn't mean that you're not good at it. It's just like, you actually might not like doing it.
Everybody was validating me all the time, like, oh, you're doing great, but I just fucking hated it. Like, I just didn't want to do it, and so I pivoted away, and now I'm much happier. Like,
it's also just like a matter sometimes of like the project. It doesn't have always to be like the skill, but like, I know for myself, like, depending on the kind of project that I storyboard on, storyboarding can be extremely painful, or it can be like the most fun thing ever in the world. It's like, it can't, because that's kind of the thing where people are like casting someone with their like personality or sensibilities. It's like, some, like, if you love drawing like a multicam sitcom, like, one person might love it, another person might feel like completely like sucked out of all their energy because you don't get to do like fun like action shots. And some other people might be just like, action it means death to my soul. So it's like really that kind of, like, sometimes it's not even just like the skill, but it can be even like the content or the sensibility. It's very like kind of invisible, this kind of things. Sometimes it's hard, but it's great to talk about.
Yeah.
I don't feel like a lot of people talk about it.
I think
sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, I think that you're leading into this saying you didn't know what to say, but I think that this is all really valuable stuff. I think it's important to reassess. If I could like distill down what you're saying, I think sometimes creative block comes from a place of like not feeling happy with what you're working on, and finding what that is, and like reassessing what your priorities are. I think that's great advice.
This is sorry, were you trying to move on?
Yeah, but if you have something to say, by all means.
This is one last point on this. Someone said this in a tweet, and I don't think everyone agrees with it, but I personally do. Where someone said that like burnout doesn't come from working too hard. Burnout comes from working too hard and not being appreciated for it. And that's something that has 100% been true for me. Where it's like like say for example, I had a great time working on Mania Adventures, right? Where it was like I was happy that what we were doing. I would work or on the movies. Let's say that, like on the movie, like 2 specifically, I worked ridiculous hours on movie 2, but I never got burnt out. I mean, it was like just really from the minute I woke up, like I would be in like Zoom calls, and like until the moment I went to sleep, just like work. And like everyone is saying like, man, you're gonna burn out, but like it never even got close. It was like every day was a crazy workload, but every day was also exciting and fun because the people that I was working with were appreciating me. They were like at no point was I like not being listened to. It was just a great work environment, and so the amount of work never got me down. But then meanwhile, like on a different project that I will not name, it was like I was struggling to have my voice heard, and I was doing barely any work on it. It was just like, here's a couple drawings or whatever like that, but they would get completely thrown out or whatever. It's like that immediately burned me out, because it was just like I am not even doing anything, but like my voice isn't being heard, and it's just like I want to freaking quit.
That's a good point.
I don't know. Like I think it's easy to think that burnout is coming from overworking, but for me, and I think if people inspected it a little bit, I think they might find as well that like it's not necessarily the amount of work. It's just that you might hate the work you're doing.
Or like you said, not being appreciated. I think that's kind of like I think that's the hardest thing. It's like when you spend a lot of like, because time is like a finite resource. So if you're spending it on something that gives you almost no return, I guess money is a return, but like appreciation is huge. But if you don't get appreciation for a lot of the time that you're spending on something, it really gets like borderline like existential crisis land, because you're like, what am I doing with my life?
Having money is great. Having money is great. Let me just say, I think that'll patch up a lot of feelings of not being appreciated if I'm making stacks. But to a limit. We have time for a few questions from Twitter. From @CPimentelArt. What kind of ideas did you want to do with Boxer Hockey that you've never got a chance to?
What kind of ideas? I mean, other than finish it.
Sure.
So, the whole arc of that story was, and this is why it's kind of been so hard to go back to, because I think it was, for me, all of the characters in Boxer Hockey were like different kind of splits of my psyche. It was like each character was a different facet of my personality. And so for me, all their arcs were me kind of doing, and I think a lot of writers work this way, but it's like all of their arcs that they were going through were all like little bits of therapy for me, just to hear it on the page. And it's why it's so hard to go back to it now, is because a lot of the stuff that I was working through in my 20s with that stuff, I've kind of resolved, right? And so it's like I don't know how to go back and tell these stories with these characters, because in my mind their stories are kind of done.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And like getting like I just I don't know. It's tricky. Like I wanted to have like where it was going was like they were heading towards the game, which was going to be their final game as a team, and it was going to be like everything was going to kind of come to a head, and like Skip and Ritz, you know, the two main characters, were going to realize that they don't like playing boxer hockey. They just like being with each other, and they thought that
that's
like,
great.
Like the problem with their relation or the difficulty in their relationship was that they thought that boxer hockey was keeping them together, but was, you know, it actually, they didn't need it, kind of thing. But I don't know. It's hard to go and tell that story now when it's just been told for so many years, and I can't start it over as well. But I guess that'd be the one main thing that I really wish I could have wrapped up on the page was just this story of these two people that really, really care about each other, but they're afraid to admit that they care about each other because of who they are. You know, it's like they've been using this sport as their justification for hanging out, but like in reality, it's just because they like each other, you know.
Yeah.
So I wish I could have wrapped that up, but I don't know. I am at an age where I told myself for years and years and years that like I'm going to get back to it. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to find a way. But it's just it gets to a point where it's like I don't know how that it's going to happen. Right? Like I'm going to have to be retired. And not have to worry about money anymore in order to really make this a reality.
I mean, it's rare that stories finish, right? Yeah. Like it's really hard. Like it's really hard to finish a thing because most of the time something gets, especially if you're not being like paid to do it, like fuck that. Like it's hard. I got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
From @Dominic V, it's a bunch of letters. Which of your career roles was most fun, and what role was most fulfilling?
Career roles is most fun. It's kind of tricky. Maybe this might answer the question. It might not. Maybe I'll word salad this together to a point that it does make sense eventually. But I guess I've kind of been going back and forth just recently on like what I want to be and like as a long-term goal, right? Like I've been doing directing for so long, but at the same time, when I work with a director or under a director that I really, really like, I find that like just as rewarding as being in charge of the whole thing. Like for example, Jeff Fowler, the director on the Sonic movies, and like Jonan Vasquez on the Zim movie, is like, you know, both of these times I was working under these guys, and you know, I wasn't the boss, but I had so much fun working with them that it at times it didn't feel like work, you know. But meanwhile, being a director has always felt like work, and so and even though, you know, being a director on something that you're really proud of at the end can feel really rewarding, it's much more exhausting. And I think directing is a job that is just completely misunderstood by basically everyone that hasn't gone through it before. I think people think a lot of times that, for example, like as we talked about earlier, it's like, oh, you're the boss, you're in charge, you get to do what you want to do. And it's like, that's not what it is at all. It's like you get to do kind of half of what you want. And then the other half of your job is making sure that the people that are working for you are also fulfilled and also having their voices heard and also, you know, getting their time to shine. Because like just because your name is at the top doesn't actually mean that it's your show, you know. It's your show, but it's also the people under you's show, and it's also the people above you's show. It's a balancing act between all these parties on either sides of you. And you are trying your best to get your voice out and to make something like a quality product, but like it's such a constant balancing act that you never really get to relax. And meanwhile, working under someone, your only priority is just help them make what they want to make in the best way. And in that way, that's like really, really fun and exciting for me. Like to see someone's face and recognize that, oh, you hit it exactly. Like you gave them what they want. Like that's an immediate and simple kind of relationship. It's like you
That's so true.
Yeah.
I feel like what you're saying is that like when you're at the top, like I mean, because you're at the top, you don't really get like you don't really get like the same kind of appreciation as you would get if you're kind of like working for like a director or like a supervisor, because you know, like there's no one around you that's gonna be like, you did a great job. They're just gonna be like moving on to the next.
Yeah, I think like maybe that's another part of it, is that like as a storyboarder or as a designer or whatever, you can know that you've done a good job because you will have done what the director asked of you. And, you know, it's like, there, I did my job well. As a director, I don't know if you can ever know if you've done a good job or not. Like, there's always going to be, like, this lingering thought in your head that it could have been better.
Oh, yeah.
Right? There's no stamp of approval on a full product, like a full film or whatever, that says this is good and you did good and it's done and great, right? Like, so as a director, you never get that moment. But like when you're working under someone, you can do a great board or you can do a great design, you know, and like, and that's just it. It's simple, little bit of serotonin or whatever, you know, it's like you get that boost and that you know that you're good. But yeah, like as a director, you never get that moment, right? Like, because nothing you ever make will ever be universally good. Everyone's always going to hate something.
It's
right?
True.
So,
Right.
It's true.
It's like there's no movie that's like everyone's like agrees like, oh yeah, that's a great perfect movie and everyone loves it and the director did a good job. It's like you can never have that, right?
Yeah. No. Tell us what are your goals for the future? What kind of stuff do you want to work on, or what maybe things you want to try?
Goals for the future. This is also maybe going back to my problem with like never actually looking for work or putting myself out there. It's like I'm afraid to have goals because I'm afraid that I'll fail at them.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's like, and I know that's exactly the opposite advice I would give anyone. Like, I think it truly, the whole like vision board thing, you know, like for anyone that doesn't know what vision boards are or how that whole thing works, but it's basically like, imagine the life you want to have, and like put it together visually in front of you, and eventually it will manifest itself. Like that's a thing that I agree with. I think it actually works personally. It's like if you like say you want to get in a particular body shape or whatever, so you put up pictures of like the shape you want your body to be in, like surrounding yourself with that, or like say I want to have this job and so I need to dress this way, and I want my garden to look like this, so this is all the stuff my garden wants to look like, and you kind of put all that stuff in front of you, and you just like put it in a place where you see and respond to it every day, and eventually it will happen. Like, I think that's a thing that can work really well, and I think for people that have goals, I really recommend it. But like for me, this is again like just I hesitate to say I want to do this or that in case it doesn't happen, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that might stem from what happened with me with boxer hockey, because with boxer hockey, I did actually have goals, you know?
Right.
Like it wasn't just like, I'm going to make this cartoon willy-nilly and just see what happens. It was like, my goals were like, I'm going to make a living out of this, right? And because I was so young and ignorant about like how you actually make a living, I think I got myself into this position where I was like, this is what I want to happen. I don't know how I'm going to make it happen, but I'm going to do it, you know? And it all kind of fell apart because I didn't know, right? And I didn't do the proper planning, and I didn't really think through like, what is it going to take for this to really happen? And this boxer hockey, you know, I wouldn't say it spectacularly failed, but it's just like it eventually failed, and it left me with a for a long time just a lot of guilty feelings in my heart. I guess you would say, like for a long time it's just like, I can't believe I let this thing that I liked so much fall by the wayside, and I can't believe all the people that are disappointed in me that I didn't finish it, and I can't believe all these people that are not going to be able to see the end of this story that they really like. And it's like, but at the same time, there's just nothing I could do about it, you know. And it was like, I wouldn't say it was a source of trauma for me, but like it was for a long time just a really, really difficult aspect of my life. And so, and it all stemmed from the fact that I had set out to make it a success. And Diesel similarly was like, I'm going to make a graphic novel series, whereas like this is going to be, you know, a long running series, and I'm going to have one of my stories finally out there and finished to completion. And that's another one where it's like it fell apart because I couldn't make a living on it. And so these are like two points in my life where I had really kind of clear, distinct goals and wants out of something, and it fell apart. So it's hard now for me to think like, what's a goal? Because what if it all fails again? Like, you know. Sure. So I have like a tricky question for you. If you had, like, with the knowledge you have now, if you had a do-over for both of those projects, what would you do differently? I mean, that's pretty actually easy. Like in hindsight, I would have made Boxer Hockey a lot shorter. Like I would have prioritized finishing pages over beautiful art. But at the same time, if I had done that, I wouldn't know how to paint. Right? Like I learned how to paint by painting BGs on Boxer Hockey, and being able to paint was what landed me the Sonic movie job. So it's like, it's decisions where it's like you pull one Jenga block out and you don't know like, what that's going to disrupt for everything later.
I mean, at the end of the day, like, you're very successful, you know, and like, it's like you said, it's like you pull one thing out. Those kinds of projects are so difficult to pull off and stick the landing, the ones where you're barely making ends meet, and you know. And I also, because I never finished the Flash series that a lot of people know me for, Hyperboy. And to me, it's like, I appreciate that people still ask about it. I'm glad that people care enough to want to see it end. But on the other hand, it's like, guys, it's been like 15 years. Like, I feel like I'd go through media like it's tissues, you know. And I think that's just the nature of things right now. Like, there's just constant content. And so I think the worth that people put on things is not equivalent to the worth put into it sometimes. And that's what makes it hard for me to feel bad about not having finished something, because I'm like, this is so many hours, and you watch it for 5 minutes, and like, I'm glad that you enjoyed it, but it's not equivalent to how much physical and mental strain it costs me. And so, like, until everybody that says, when is this thing coming out, is willing to, you know, chip in and to pay me basically a salary to do it, I'm like, I'm pretty neutral about it. I'm like, I thank you, I'm glad you enjoyed it, but I was 14 and had all the time in the world. And I just don't have any of that anymore. I don't have time or energy. So it's like, I enjoy it. Yeah, I don't know.
I do feel like, I mean, I kind of understand though, I don't know, for me, like when I create something that I can't finish, I do feel like, I don't know, creating a character that people actually do care about, I think it's the best feeling in the world. And I do understand when you're talking about guilt, like Tyson, because it's like, it's kind of like, oh, I like birthed this like being. I mean, it's not real, but it sort of exists. Like multiple people believe it, like read it and like buy into it. It kind of exists, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like a child that you're like, I'm sorry, I abandoned you, and you know. I get it. I mean, I understand both sides of it. There's definitely
I think like it's tricky because you want to honor your audience, and you know, is the things that you make, like, they mean stuff to you, but they also mean a lot to the people reading them. And so you feel like again, I'm using strong words, but whatever. It's like you feel like a failure for letting them down, right? And maybe, I don't know, maybe some people don't, and that's great. And you also like shouldn't. I'm not saying that this is how you should feel, but it's just kind of the way it is, where it's like you made them a promise in uncertain terms that you were going to tell a story, and they got invested, and then they are left with an unsatisfying finish to a story that they really wanted to hear. And even though they didn't give you any money, it's like, even though they didn't do anything to like deserve or whatever, the story that they're giving, it's like you still feel obligated to them as your audience to make good on the things that they were looking to.
Yeah, because it's also this thing where it's like people don't have to care about your work, right. So
they don't.
It's kind of like it's like this kind of weird trade-off. Like creating is like this kind of weird trade-off for sure.
I've become pretty cynical about it because like I've done a lot of projects, I've done a lot of things, and like the amount of work that I would put into something, it just rarely ended up feeling worth it, and especially when I'm trying to pay the bills and lead a healthy life. And so it's like people just don't understand how much I think they don't understand how much time it takes to make something good. And so for them, I feel like we see it online all the time, where it's like people think that it's the same thing when you're a huge animation studio with a pipeline and a budget and one person cranking out comics or shorts. And it's like, those are not equivalent.
I would kind of caveat that though. I feel like I have read like tweets and people commenting and people being like fans being very, what's the word? Like mindful. Like, I don't know. When I was publishing Rodney and people were like, please take time to rest. And like, we'll be here waiting for you. Like, there's like, these people do, like they exist and they care.
They both exist.
I'd say both sides of that coin are present, and it's kind of human nature to hear the negative voices a little louder sometimes. So it's like, you can have a bunch of people saying, yeah, take your time to rest. But then there'll be that one person who's like, hey man, where's my next page? And it's like, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Jeez.
Exactly. Are you my boss? I should say, like, I think Tyson's right. I think that it depends on what you are focusing on, and nobody in my, like, I don't know, fandom, I guess you would call it, but like none of my followers have ever pressured me for anything. It's always coming from a good place. But I guess I'm thinking of other fandoms where it does become toxic and it is become pressure, and and I can see those creators burning out at a very fast rate because it's like they probably have that same feeling of obligation and feeling like, oh, well, it's making these people happy, and so I should keep grinding and keep like doing all this stuff. But it's like, to what end? Like at a certain point, like how much of your life are you giving up for people that would probably stop giving a shit like 2 weeks later and move on to some new fandom, so, but that, like I said, it's cynical and it's
no, I mean, it's just a tricky tightrope to walk. It's like you have to respect, and appreciate your audience. At the same time, you have to respect and appreciate yourself. And giving in to one too much or the other is going to leave you in a difficult position. It's like if you give too much of yourself to your audience, you're going to hurt your own psyche in the process. And like, you can't do that.
Yep.
At the same time, you can't just treat your audience as disposable, chaff or whatever like that. So
it's a balance.
Yeah.
I think that was a great conversation. Thanks so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I think that's the end of this creative block. Tyson, thanks for being our guest and sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thanks to your listeners. Follow us on Twitter. It's at Creative Block, creative without the vowels, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks to our editor Clemens for editing the podcast, and Malik for helping us produce the show.
If you love our show, then support us on Patreon. Becoming a patron gets you early access to interviews as well as bonus episodes. Click the link in the description of this episode. I've been your host, Gene.
And I was V. Keep being creative, and we'll see you next week.
Bye!